This will be a reading of In a Foreign Town in a Foreign Land by Thomas Ligotti. I will subtitle it by saying this reading is in part an attempt by myself to satisfy the terms of a certain agreement made with certain powers. There's not much point going into that, so we can just start this here. In a foreign town, in a foreign land, his shadow shall rise to a higher house. In the middle of the night, I lay wide awake in bed, listening to the dull black drone of the wind outside my window and the sound of bare branches scraping against the shingles of the roof just above me. Soon my thoughts became fixed upon a town, picturing its various angles and aspects, a remote town near the northern border. Then I remembered that there was a hilltop graveyard that hovered not far beyond the edge of town. I have never told a soul about this graveyard, which for a time was a source of great anguish for those who had retreated to the barren landscape of the northern border. It was within the hilltop graveyard, a place that was far more populated than the town over which it hovered, that the body of Asclepius had been buried. Known throughout the town as a recluse who possessed an intensely contemplative nature, Asclepius had suffered from a disease that left much of his body in a grossly deformed condition. Nevertheless, despite the distinguishing qualities of his severe deformity and his intensely contemplative nature, the death of Asclepius was an event that passed almost entirely unnoticed. All of the notoriety gained by the recluse, all of the comment attached to his name, occurred sometime after his disease-mangled body had been housed among the others in the hilltop graveyard. At first there was no specific mention of Asclepius, but only a kind of twilight talk, dim and pervasive murmurs that persistently revolved around the graveyard outside of that town, often touching upon more general topics of a morbid character, including some abstract discourse, as I interpreted it, on the phenomenon of the grave. More and more, whether one moved about the town or remained in some secluded quarter of it, this twilight talk became familiar and even invasive. It emerged from shadowed doorways along narrow streets, from half-open windows of the highest rooms of the town's old houses, and from the distant corners of labyrinthine and resonant hallways. Everywhere it seemed there were voices that had become obsessed to the point of hysteria with a single subject: the missing grave. No one mistook these words to mean a grave that somehow had been violated, its ground dug up and its contents removed, or even a grave whose headstone had absconded, leaving the resident of some particular plot in a state of anonymity. Even I, who was less intimate than many others with the peculiar nuances of the northern border town, understood what was meant by the words "a missing grave" or "an absent grave." The hilltop graveyard was so dense with headstones and its ground so riddled with interments that such a thing would be astonishingly apparent. Where there once had been a grave like any other, there was now, in the same precious space, only a patch of virgin earth.